Hi everybody. So I'm expecting this is probably going to take 10, 15 minutes at the most, and then I'm just going to open up to Q&A. But so I'm not only going to be talking about LiveLike today. I have my own bias, and I'm the CEO of LiveLike, so there's going to be talking a lot about what we do, but I'm going to focus more generally on what you need to actually have to create a live sports viewing experience, the different business and product element. So the world of live sports in general is very much investing into VR and is very interested in VR for the simple reason that TV audience is going down all across the board, and there's this need to switch to OTT and to mobile solution, but the mobile solution has picked up a lot, but not as much as they wish, and not as much as the TV audiences have actually dropped off. So there's this sort of drive inside the sports industry to actually push for alternative solution. Now, what's being done a lot in sports up to today has mostly been single-time activation, 360 videos, and stuff like that. But there's a couple companies, including ours, that are actually focusing on going into full VR live experiences. So there's a couple of roadblocks today that are still inhibiting virtual reality adoption within the sports world. It's too expensive to create. 360, just pure 360 video is just not engaging enough. People put it on, they'll be like, wow, it's great. But then they just kind of go like, okay, I've been in there for 5 minutes now. What do I do except just watch the game? And you feel super secluded. It's hard to feel engaged and to share that content with the people. Now, so the logical conclusion is simply you got to have more engaging content. You got to make it easy and affordable for the broadcaster to broadcast week over week, which is a very big deal. Live sports isn't about a single activation; it's about every week content. And if you have something that costs, a typical Premier League game will cost you, depending on the game, varies a lot, but anywhere from $75,000 to $300,000 for single production. And with basically no user base today, you can't have a production that costs like over $50,000 because they'll do it once, but they won't do it repeatedly week over week. So looking at the actual space, who's in there? There's actually only a handful of companies. I'm going to mainly focus on 3, and I kind of omitted a significant one. I'll talk about that after. The main 2 ones or the main way people think about virtual reality sports in general is the way these 2 companies tend to do it. NextVR is the big elephant in the room because they raised at a like $800 million valuation. Done a ton of live event. They were kind of first in the space. Very good quality video, but it's mostly video. It's mostly about being inside of the experience. Voke has a similar deal. They a little bit more hardware play. They build these proprietary cameras that allow you to take a feed and put it in VR and also not in VR as in regular computers, which is good for the entire production workflow. But both of these people tend to focus mainly on the video and the transmission and lowering the barrier to entry for bandwidth and some of the technological issues that you need for virtual reality. So this is typically an experience that you'll see in there. You'll literally be at the game. They have really good 3D capture and transmission at low bandwidth, and it's very good at making you feel like you're there. Totally on the other end of the spectrum, Virtually Live, which I think it used to be a British company. Definitely very involved in England. Actually released a Formula E experience recently, and that's completely on the other end of the spectrum because first of all, it's focusing on the big, the more tethered, heavier, more rich rigs, and they use the car tracking because Formula E's and Formula 1s tend to have chips in them where you can track them on the race. So they use that metadata and actually recreate the race completely in the digital world. So what you see, and I apologize for the poor quality of the image. That's the only one I could find that had the inside of the application. It wasn't great quality. It actually looks really good inside the application. And that works really well for cars and for stuff where you have really fully tracked. But for soccer and things like that, you lose a lot of that, just how the guy bent and kicked it from a certain angle, and these kind of things kind of get lost in there. So this very interesting solution, but applies only to very specific scenarios. And so what we do is pretty much halfway in between the 2. We actually replace the immediate environment around you is a VIP room, which is a 3D environment, and in front of you you have a live pretty much this. I'm just not going to describe it. It's pretty much like that. This whole part here is live video. You have the stadium, you have the crowd, you have the field, you have the player, and then the immediate room that you're around is actually 3D. And the reason why we go there is because doing this allows us to shoot with very simple and cheap rigs, or have a very low footprint in the production, both in space, and it's non-invasive to the actual production, and at the same time allows us to have a ton of interactivity, social, and things like that. So broadcasters today, because they're starting to understand virtual reality pretty well, because they've all investigated it a lot, but they still don't have a full mastery of it, and they still look to startups and to the VR industry itself to actually pioneer and do a lot of the work. So they wouldn't build some of these features on their own, because it's millions of dollars of R&D and years of work that they would just rather honestly let us pioneer this stuff and then license that technology from us. Big elements that we need to cover in order to have virtual reality be adopted by the masses: interactivity and social. We need to work within the existing workflows for these broadcasters. That's a major one. I can't stress it enough. If you show up with a gigantic rig and you're like, this is an amazing piece of hardware, but you put it down there like, this is way too ugly, I can't put that next to the field. And so I'm just actually going to come back 2 seconds to NextVR. NextVR, for example, they did one of the primary debates, or something like that. Yeah, one of the primary political debates in the U.S. Elections, and they had super awesome rig. They put it down. The guys were like, way too invasive, too big, so they moved it to the corner, and then everybody that was actually in the experience was like seeing it, but it's like, it was way too in the corner to actually be like, have a lot of values. But if they had a tiny rig that they could put behind the like tiny podium or something like that, they would have no problem to actually like politically be able to push through. Big deal. Also, something that Vogue does rather well, that we do as well. Make sure that it works on mobile and tablet, just because you can reach hundreds of millions of people instead of just the few hundred thousands or low millions of people that have VR headsets. And then, of course, the big thing is that broadcasters are going to want to actually monetize their experience and make money from it, even in this early stage. And so you got to have monetization options, which I'll talk about a little bit. After that, you can build a ton of stuff in VR. Social, graphic overlays, statistics, fantasy football, social elements, a lot of technological improvements to be made, like making sure that it streams only the parts that you watch. I'm not going to dive into all these features because, I mean, that could be a talk in its own, and I don't want to honestly bore you with super deep details. But they're all important. Ultimately, this is what broadcasters need right now, and this is what this is what NextVR, Vogue, and in a way, Virtually Live as well are doing. We build the design, we do the engineering, and in some cases do the video production, but ultimately we just give them an app. And I actually think I forgot to put a slide in there, but the way you can experience that today, if you're in the United States, unfortunately, although actually in England it works too, you just literally download Fox Sports VR, the app, Fox space Sports space VR. Or in the UK, there's actually a Manchester City experience that you can download that's publicly available, where you can try it out with or without a VR headset. As in, you can just pull it up on your phones, and it has a sort of VR-less mode. Ultimately, though, to have a good and to get the broadcasters to actually accept virtual reality, you need to be able to offer the entire end-to-end workflow. You can't force the broadcaster to do everything, so. If the broadcaster wants to do their own productions, everything, you got to be able to enable that, but you got to be able to offer the entire end-to-end solution, or the support of the industry is not going to be strong enough to actually create these experiences. Yeah. The big sort of almost final point that I'm making is that you got to be able to monetize the experience, and that I can't stress that enough. In our experience, because we have 3D space and live video, we actually have an unusually large amount of inventory, but even inside the video you can actually embed, and much like you do on TV today, using actually the same technology you do on TV today, you can actually embed digital advertisement as part of the live video stream. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but when you actually look at a Premier League game on television and you're not in the UK or something, they actually change on the side of the court. they actually change all the banner ads that are there, graphed digitally, and you usually don't notice it. I mean, you can a little bit if you focus on it. Notice that it looks a little unrealistic sometimes, but for the most part, it just blends it really well. And using the same exact technology, you can actually go crazy inside the video and do all kinds of crazy advertisements. Similarly, in any 3D space, that applies more to us and to Virtually Live than to Next VR Invoke. You can actually sponsor a lot of the area. You can have a little Coca-Cola can that's not invasive at all, and that would actually be a very premium real estate for advertisement, and would not be invasive to the user. And that's the perfect blend that sponsors are looking for. Ultimately, though, what's lacking for the sponsors today is actually user adoption of virtual reality headset, which is why you got to come back and actually have an experience that works for mobile as well as the virtual reality experience itself. You could go crazy with the ads themselves. If you look at the Coca-Cola can, it takes you to the 360 video that's been like a one-time activation production. That's something that almost every sponsor I've talked to that I've done a single activation are like, oh my God, I wish I had that way to show my, $500,000 super awesome 360 video on a weekly basis to a bunch of recurrent users. And ultimately, that's what live sports will be about, bringing users week over week back to virtual reality. And without having one company dominating, there's I'm super biased in this opinion, obviously, but virtual reality live sports is, in our opinion, what's going to be the main driver of the mass adoption of VR in the world, just because it's the most adopted content in the world, even on television. I didn't have a good graphics for this, but if you guys are interested in the way augmented reality is actually going to work, there's an amazing HoloLens video by Microsoft. You guys can YouTube it. That does it's completely CGI post-produced video, so it's not like actually built that way. Even though I got in an argument on Reddit with a guy who was saying that it was absolutely being built right now, which I have high doubts about. But Microsoft did an amazing rendering of what sports in augmented reality could look like with the NFL. And ultimately, everybody that's doing VR sports today is also going to move over to augmented reality down the line, because it's as I mentioned earlier on the panel that we were speaking at, it's great for users to be secluded and inside the stadium and feel like they're there, but it's also great for the users to be able to put that aside and be back in their living room with the friends that's next to them, but still have all that augmentation, the statistics, and everything else that you can bring inside of virtual reality. And that's it.